It's Monday, so we're back, of course. Here we are.
I'm just sitting here singing along, getting pumped up.
Dancing here. So, yeah, I should show you some other stuff, by the way. Hey, I created, you'll appreciate this, of less obnoxious, the smaller version of those stickers, by the way.
Well, with that, good morning and welcome to the latest episode of Project Failure Files, the series for anyone who manages people, projects, or processes for a living or pretty much anything else. Heard a little cat. You never know. I'm Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, founder of Collab Talk, and welcome to another episode of our series where Sharon and we explore the world of project-related, management-related topics from the perspective of what not to do. In each episode, we talk about the common pitfalls, share some personal stories and examples, and explore strategies and best practices to help you to be successful.
Let's be really honest, Christian. Like half of this show is us sharing personal stories and experiences about what not to do.
No, it's just like it's not like do you have a story? It's like, of course I have a story for that. Let me just share.
You should just rename this to to Christian and Sharon tell stories.
Commiserate.
Just the stories. Oops, all stories. Okay,
that's right. We come up with a graphic for that. Oops, all stories.
Anyways, in this episode, speaking of things like that, in this episode, we're going to talk about the mistake of holding on to projects and deliverables that are not providing the value that you really intended, and about the longer you hang on to it, the longer you keep working at it, the more it will actually cost you in the long term.
So like a good idea that just doesn't seem to be getting traction, like a podcast?
Many podcasts. Yes, many podcasts and other type things that people really invest a lot of their time and energy into. They think it's the right thing, but they're just slowly losing money over time. Maybe, things like a vendor solution that looks like maybe it's definitely going to help, but then it doesn't actually do it and it's not working. Maybe a strategy that doesn't pan out. Or I know this is shocking. The market shifted while you were working on something. This is the hardest thing, especially in government work, because they plan 3 to 5 years in advance. And then you feel really sorry for them when things like AI roll out, because, it's like you have to be able to keep up with that. So now I'm building something and the thing doesn't even exist anymore. And so now you just throw money in the trash.
It makes me think of some government initiatives. Like you have is a perfect example is the new, what do they call them? The new here in the U.S. the new state by state, the driver's licenses that have
the real ID.
The real ID.
Real ID.
That was a 30-year ago idea, folks.
I had that forever.
30 years. It took till now. It's required. People are like, "Oh my gosh, you're forcing us."
It's so last minute.
30 years, folks. Anyway, just crazy. It does remind me, this topic though, those project managers that they push that methodology without making common sense edits.
That never happens.
Only apply what makes sense for the project, but they try to force through an entire methodology. Usually this happens. I would tell any of my direct reports that different companies I work for, I would pay for, I'd cover the cost of going and doing their PMP certification. And they would come back and I'd say, I just want you to understand, I never want you to attempt to apply everything that you've learned for this project. Use what makes sense that is applicable to the culture, to the project, all those kinds of things. And if it's in the PM buck, therefore I must do this thing because it's there. It's part of the standards. No, that line by line, they want to go and follow that standard. It can be excruciating to kind of bring those people back down to earth.
That's called bureaucracy, and I believe we have an entire episode around that topic already.
Yes, I believe so.
So, or maybe it's a project that now it's costing more than you planned on, and so now you're just throwing money away. Especially if it's got little or no return value, right? So I've put all this money into it. It's just losing me money and I'm just continuing to churn. really what's important is, do you have processes in place to be able to go in, and do you have, and this is, we've talked before about checkpoints and, making sure that everything's going okay. Do you have a process in place to review that and say, okay, are we okay? Do we have a go-no decision? Are we identifying, hey, by the way, this is like really like doing more than we thought it was going to do. It's costing more in money, in time. We don't have the right resources. Things aren't getting delivered the way that we expected. The technology has changed. Literally, the stuff we were building at the beginning of the project doesn't exist anymore. Like, you got to like have that conversation. You got to have those process checks in place, like, to be able to say, did something change significantly enough that it's going to now impact it, and how are we going to deal with that?
I would say it's not a failure, Sharon, to have that conversation and be like that. If I think it's a failure to continue going on something that has no future.
Especially like 3 to 5 year projects where you're like, we don't need to talk about it.
Or a relationship. No, but anyway.
Or a podcast.
Yeah. What? No.
With one viewer. Viewer.
Yeah, no. That's you're not catching the grand plan, Sharon. Like, no. But let's focus. But no, it's you need to have that. We talked about this last week.
Yes.
Like having that structure, having it so it forces you to go in to be clinical, to be structured in your approach, to ask those questions. Do we continue along in this process? And it really goes back to the culture. I know we're diving into the conversation. I know, just to wrap up the intro.
Comment. I'll just say, just comment. All right.
Yeah. We're just like every episode. I mean, we're gonna dive right into it because we're passionate about these topics. But please feel free to comment, share other ideas, provide feedback, reach out to us, all those kinds of things. But
now on with the show.
Yeah. So jumping into this now, but I know we want to get into definitions up front as well. But having that structure, building that into the culture of your organization, so you're going to ask these kinds of questions. You want to develop an organizational culture where people aren't afraid to try things to make things better. Part of that is that learning organization is recognizing, nope, that's not what we wanted. Oh, right. You know what? We're going to halt that. We're going to go in a different direction here. And so it can be difficult to go do that. People have spent time and effort, and like, it feels like we didn't earn anything from this. No, but you can learn from that experience. You know what now not to do around this, or that solution won't work. And how do we now improve on our discovery and design and architecture of the thing so we avoid some of these pitfalls? There's so much. I think we undervalue learning in our organizations, modern organizations. It's like, it's got to be right every time, first time out there. It's like, no, I want people who have learned through failures and who will never repeat those failures.
Critical thinking skills. And lean was founded on the whole idea of the lean movement, and lean methodology was founded on this principle, is that the earlier you detect something that's not working and the earlier you fix it, the less money it costs overall, and the more deliverability you have in a project or a product or whatever. And, this was driven by the study, like, I think it was Toyota that did it, where basically they put in these pull handles along the factory line, where basically if there was something that was going wrong, they could pull the handle and it would stop the entire assembly line. And so I think
anybody have the ability to go and pull that based on their area too.
Anybody could pull it. And I think, and this goes to the idea that, it wasn't just the foreman saying you have to stop. It wasn't the machine operator saying to stop. Literally, if anybody along the way, anybody on the team recognized that there was a concern, a reason for the workflow to stop, they had the right and the ability to stop the entire assembly line. And I think this is really important when you say, I think we need everybody to be part of this. This is something that I've really struggled with for a long time, is as we start to talk about the definitions around this, it's this idea that if something's not working, if everybody does it and goes along with it and says, we're just going to let this keep happening, we're not going to stop anything, we're not going to make any changes, we're not going to improve it, we're not going to learn the lesson from it or whatever, the longer you allow that to persist, like the worse and the worse and the worse and the worse it gets. The minute that somebody stands up and says, no, this isn't working, the more opportunity you have for at least to have a conversation about it.
I know that this is a bit more of a broad way of thinking of this too, but the same can be said about for a leadership team, letting a toxic manager, director remain in the company,
Yep.
how that can destroy a culture.
Every decision.
Like we've had, I've worked in these companies where you just have, like I made career decisions and moved out because of bad management. And I said, like, I love the project. I'm excited about the opportunity here, but a bad leader that's toxic, that's making it, awful. I think one company I left, I was in senior leadership, but I left because the CEO would not make difficult decisions and ignored the toxic behavior and other things. And I said, I then can't trust other decisions you're making. If this is going on, customers, partners have complained, you're aware of it, and you will not go deal with this person because of your personal relationship with them, and it's detrimental to the business. And so, I'm out. I'm done.
Yeah.
And, not surprisingly, not too long afterwards, they finally made a move. Like good for them that they made an adjustment there.
Yeah. Yep. So let's talk about some definitions around this topic in terms of when a deliverable is not delivering.
Yeah. I mean, what does that actually mean? I mean, it could be that, again, a misalignment of the strategic priorities because this shifting business. So it's still a value. It could still be delivering what it intended to deliver, but now the business has moved and what's needed is adjusted. And that's where you have like a lot of organizations. Like here we are, this year we've seen a lot of in the tech sector rifts around that. They're not performance based. It's that the company says the direction is moving and such, and this is around like AI is in particular, where it doesn't make sense that we're doing some of these old functions and these old roles. We need to change things around. So it's always, it's always difficult. There could be, hardworking people in a rift. It could be like it's a valuable project that we'll get some value, but not what we thought. And we actually need to go in a completely different direction. So that could define not delivering.
Yeah, I think, I think about it in terms of just because you're doing something and just because you've done something doesn't mean it was the right thing to do. And it doesn't mean that it's the thing that's going to bring you value. And we talk about in these calls all the time, there's a difference between personal satisfaction and business need, right? And we talk about the clinical need around the business. What are you trying to accomplish in that project or initiative or, whatever it is that you're trying to do? And did you accomplish the thing you set out to do? And this is where I get really frustrated when, like, we talk about business initiatives and goals are around doing a thing and not like solving a problem, right? So if we really want to go all the way back to the root of this, I think about initiatives as solving a problem, but not always saying how to do it exactly, right? And so when you have a goal to do something versus a goal to solve a problem, at the end of the day, you might have done the thing, but you might not have solved the problem. So if I say to you, build a bridge, okay, well, I built a bridge, but it's in the wrong city. Well, that's a problem because I have a bridge and you did the work and you charged me for the work, but it's not where I need it to be. So you did the thing I told you to do, but you didn't solve the problem I needed solved. And there's a really cute little graphic about this that's been in IT for 100 years. And you know exactly which one I'm talking about because it's, that whole what the client needs versus what was delivered. And I think when we talk about the difference between things that are delivered versus not delivering the thing that needs, not delivering what needed to be delivered, then you just because you did something doesn't mean you did the right thing.
Right. May I just bring into mind, I'm just thinking like high-speed trains in the state of California, but I've been talking about that since I remember in the 90s having those conversations. It's still a hot mess.
Well, I would say the other definition I would think is where you're doing something that's not fruitful, right? So, and this is where a lot of times people get on auto repeat. I'm just going to keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over because that's what I was told to do. but like nobody's getting any value out of that. And
Yeah,
so
but
you're doing work you don't need to do.
but there's and so that points to the failure of management, of leadership, if you don't have those difficult conversations. Like, here's case in point. I had worked for a company that had very large software company, and we're like annual commitments to put together. This is what I'm going to be working on, and every like weekly or twice a month, one-on-ones with managers, you're going through and basically walking through those commitments, and got to the end of the year and said, well, those weren't the right commitments. Like, well, wait a second. We agreed to it. You signed off on it. I was delivering to that. I get that the business has changed because I added scope. I added a lot of other things. Like with those core commitments, we're talking about this every week. And this, at the end of the year in the performance review, you're telling me that these were the wrong commitments? Right? Like, how is that a failure of mine by doing the things which ultimately you, my manager, are responsible for keeping? Like, look, we should have changed it up as soon as we would have changed those annual commitments. It was something new. This is the first I'm hearing of wrong commitments. Like, you signed off on. Anyway, not that I'm bitter and harboring any anger over that.
Write it in. This is not therapy.
But again, that is
sometimes it is.
So that is so you have to look at that, especially from a manager, a project manager, is, do we have the mechanisms in place to review and make adjustments to that? Because you cannot operate in life on the waterfall method. It has to be more agile. You need to be looking at, what do we know today? It is the era of Miss Janet Jackson of what have you done for me lately? To go through. Maybe that should be our new theme song for per episode. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, where you have the mechanisms, the weekly status, where like we talked about last week, talking about budget, where you can be clinical in the approach and talk about, this isn't working. It's not a failure of you, Sharon, the project manager, on this. Like, it's these other factors that are out there that are driving this. Maybe it was something you did as well, but not likely. It's probably these other factors. Let's make a decision. All right, Sharon, we're going to move you over to this other project that is in alignment. We're going to do this. So it's difficult. Those are hard conversations to have, especially when people have spent tons of time and their passions around that. But ultimately, it's what makes sense for the business. And making those changes, making those course corrections as early as possible. The longer it takes, then the more difficult it is to move the ship and avoid the iceberg.
Well, and I think about it, we talk about feedback cycles a lot, and I know this is a big topic for you, and I agree with you. But if you think about the idea that you're not allowing any of that feedback to come in, that you could be doing completely the wrong thing, and everybody's just blindly kind of going along with it. And I think about, when people are like, hiking or backpacking or something, and, everybody knows that you're doing the right thing when you're on a trail, right? Because you know that the trail is the right place to be. But then all of a sudden you get lost somewhere and you're climbing a hill, you're, going into a rocky terrain. And if you're leading a group of people, they might be like, are we in the right place? Are we even doing the right thing? And if that leader is just like, yep, we're doing the right thing, we're going down the right place, that's one thing. But if you're like, just blindly following them, that's really hard to know if you're in the right place or not. And so I think this, we're talking about this, and we're talking about how this kind of works as a team building effort as a project manager, is like, if you know that you're doing the right thing and you're delivering and you're getting that feedback from the group and from the clients, and you're getting the feedback from, whoever it is that you're working with, internal or external, you're getting feedback from your stakeholders, you're getting feedback from the team, and everybody's like, I can see the trail. I know we're on the trail. I know we're going the right direction. That's one thing. But if you're like just kind of randomly going through this place and nobody's talking about it, they're all just like, we're just trusting that you're leading us in the right direction, we're just going to blindly follow you with no feedback. I think that kind of takes us into this next section that we're going to talk about with the impacts, because it creates this kind of scenario where I don't even know if anybody knows that what they're doing matters anymore.
That, we saw this shift, and you hear about this occasionally, but exactly around that, where people say, I want to, it's not that I don't want to develop skills and learn stuff, but I want to work on projects that mean something. And for some people, it's like, I want to do something that helps make the world a better place. I might, or that I, and people have even said, there's data that's out there that, like, I'll take a pay cut if I can work on projects that have more meaning. There's a sense of purpose around that. And that's even the younger generation says more and more, they don't want to go work just for the dollar. Yep. They want to go and do something that has meaning, has purpose. And so sometimes, but even in projects, if you don't care about any of that, I care somewhat about that, but
people do care. They may or may not say it, but I do think they care.
I mean, I have a niche that I spend, and I've spent most of my career, certainly the last 20 years, specifically around collaboration technology and focusing on how can people work better together. That's where my passion, the passion lays, like that side of things. Still should have done that doctoral program, but anyway. It would have been so timely if I had finished that 20 years ago, the PhD. But anywho, not dwelling on the past here. I'm rising above it, Sharon. I'm a professional. But again, it's the difference between, am I working on something, it's busy, it's paying the bills, right, versus here's the outcome. Here's outcome-based focus versus activity-based focus. Am I just a cog in the wheel somewhere and that's good enough? I'm making a paycheck, or am I working towards something that has value, that's lasting? When I'm done, to go back and look at the body of work, have I done something that's had an impact on society? Some people, that's really very important to have that, to be able to look back and know that they changed something. They made the world a better place.
Well, and what not to do is just assume everybody's turning in all of their hours, and you just keep checking the box and you keep letting the spreadsheets fly through, and everybody's marking their tasks off, and you're not double checking it from the project management side. Like, you're not double checking to make sure that what they're doing is meaningful and what they're doing is meeting with the client or the end user, the stakeholder is needing, making sure that the work that they are doing, aligns with all of the measurements that you set in place. I mean, I think sometimes I know you've never seen this. It's probably going to be a shock to you. But I have seen project managers that basically, when things come through, they're just like, next, approve, like, click all, approve, shove it through, right? And I do think what not to do is just to ignore everything and blindly just kind of let the whole thing go by and not worry about whether what you're doing really matters or if there's anything to think about, as opposed to stopping and saying, I've got people that I'm managing. I've got people that I'm delivering to. I've got things that I'm trying to accomplish. I've got budgets I'm trying to manage. I've got, scope I'm trying to adhere to. I've got timelines that I need to think about. Like, if you are ignoring all that thing and just letting it just all kind of pass through, I think that's the absolute what not to do.
Well, that's what I mean, talking about the impacts. I mean, you just kind of covered some of that. Like, you're letting all these things happen. What are the results? What kind of damage do you see that happens when you let that lack of purpose kind of become the cultural norm?
Well, I mean, the work doesn't get done, right? I know this is what not to do is don't pay attention to what's happening because just let it all kind of fly by. What you find happens, and this is actually unfortunately more common than not, is that nothing's actually happening. People are showing up to meetings, but no decisions are getting made. People are entering tasks, but maybe they're not getting done fully, or they're not getting done well, or they're not ensuring quality. Stuff's getting entered, but it's not accurate. Documents getting delivered, but it's not correct, or it's not, quality controlled, whatever. But I mean, at the end of the day, work doesn't get done. Things don't get delivered, and people on the other end, whatever your stakeholders are, they're not satisfied. And I'm not even going to say happy, because that's not the right word. But at the end of the day, your job is to solve a problem. Your job is to complete the project in alignment with solving that problem. And if their problem isn't solved, they're not satisfied. And if they're not satisfied, then it creates negative feelings, lack of trust, lack of cohesion, discouragement, frustration. Like pick all the negative emotions in the box, but stuff's just not getting done.
Well, stuff is getting done, but it's the difference between, and you and I've had this
Quality stuff isn't getting done. That's
right.
Exactly it.
But I mean, you and I've had this conversation too about, that there's we've both had people that have been direct reports where I always refer to it as like the ticket takers versus the strategic thinkers that are out there. And again, it's good to have you need a mixture of both of those things. But I mean, what generally happens when you have, newer, greener employees around something, they're not sure what to do. They don't have the confidence. They don't have the skill yet to go out and to pick something up, to know what needs to be done and go and do things to keep themselves busy, focused on productive work activities. And so they're ticket takers. They're like, what do I do next? What should I do next?
What do you want me to do?
What do you want me to do? Like nobody gave me something to do. And so I sat there playing solitaire, like whatever it is. Versus people that go out and say, well, I know this is a project. Here's the broader initiative. This is what we're trying to achieve as a company, as an organization. Here's what our team is focused on. Here's ways that I can go and help. So now it's like, I always say that you've heard me say again and again, I'm one of those, like, I need to have a full inbox. I need to have like to know that I have plenty of work to go and be done, and it's prioritized so I can focus on what has to be done today, what would be nice to be done today, and then stuff that needs to be done at some point doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. And prioritizing in those kind of three buckets. And so I get the stuff done that has to be done today, start focusing on the stuff that I like needs to be done in the next week or two. And then when I'm done with those things, that part never ends. But then
it goes on a list somewhere.
Spend on some other time on those other things, which are kind of nice to do and nice to have. I mean, the reality is that you need to have a mixture of those things, because sometimes you need a mental break from those other things to be able to get the creative juices flowing by going and working on some training and watching a video of some new technology or whatever it is, so that you don't have that burnout, which can happen.
Yeah.
But that idea of moving away from that check the box delivery rather than critical thinking, innovation, learning, growth. It's like, I'm a really fan of, it was sad to see like Microsoft got rid of, or I don't know what they did, what the story is with Viva Goals, but that whole concept of here at a company, the company level, we're doing these three things. These are our focus areas at the start of this year. The CEO says, this is our directive, these three things. Each business unit goes and looks at, all right, for these three things, here's what we're going to do to deliver on those three things. And then your team looks at your business unit and says, here's what we're going to do to drive those. And you as an individual then looks at, for my team, we've signed up for this. Here's how what I can do on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis to drive towards those team goals. And so if I find I'm working on more and more things that are not tied to those, ultimately roll up to those three company goals, I know I'm out of step. I'm off the
trail.
Right. So I like that kind of organization. I identify with that, because it helps you at the ground level better understand what I'm doing today, day to day, has a direct impact on what the company's trying to do with those three initiatives.
It's almost like initiative planning matters, and people that are not in senior management should care what the initiatives are for the business.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of mistakes that we make that would fall into that. Like we get into
this is the easy part.
of the avoiding the pitfalls part of it is the easy part. Well, measuring the completion of tasks. Like I do that. I am a task list driven checklist there. It's the way that my brain works. Like I need to have that. I need the endorphins that are created by completing the task and ding the sound. For me, it's like the box has to be X'd out and double lined through the item. It's part of the OCD. But if you, other pitfalls of not having that direction, that sense of purpose around that. It means that you could then misinterpret what the priorities should be and where you should focus. You're not going to get proper stakeholder validation of things. It's more of a status report. Here's what I did, instead of having the conversation of, here's what I did that's driving towards the goal of this.
Yes. How are we working with you to solve this problem and to do this thing?
Right. And that's why, I mean, it sounds too mechanical to go in every time. What's the purpose of this project? Why are we doing this? Yep. It's easy to forget that. Yeah. And so I would say that should be part of, it's like having a structured meeting that I always approach it. Here's the purpose of the meeting here, folks. Walking through, here's the goal. Here's the agenda, what we're going to go through to drive towards that goal. And here's the input. This is what I'm looking for from everyone in this meeting. I appreciate it when others structure their meetings that way. I appreciate it. Like when I remember, like when I get that organized to do it, how much better it goes. And then I slip up, I stop doing it. And because I'm comfortable, like we generally know, hey, this is a project or a review for this. There's no agenda, but because we're in the rhythm, we don't need to have that level of detail. It's still good to have the detail so you don't forget.
Yeah. And that's why I say pitfalls are so easy, because it's so easy to assume. It's so easy to do things that you've always done it this way, or we're in a rhythm, we're used to it, or, we know what they need. We know, we already talked to them, as opposed to really pushing yourself to make sure that you're staying in alignment with what's happening along the way. It's so easy to just kind of get off the beaten path.
Do you have any stories, Sharon, from your experience, maybe early on, where you had a manager that just halted something, where you just kind of like, whoa, wait a second. Like I like that project. We're working on it, and just said, this is moving in the wrong direction. We're going to shut this down. We're going to do something different. Did you ever had like that abrupt of a stop in a project?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, several times. I was trying to have like my brain like popped up 5 at once. Right. But yeah, I actually worked on a project once where, I think the biggest one is where, there was a project that was going on. There was a belt project that was happening. And that particular Six Sigma belt left, and they brought me in, and it was like midstream during the project. And they were just like, hey, basically this person has already done the work. We'd like you to come in and we'd like you to just finish the project out, like come in midpoint and finish the project out. All the decisions have already been made.
Sounds like half the projects I'm working on with you and your team.
Half the project's already done. It's all ready to go. I just need you to finish it out. And I was like, okay, well, and I speak to elicitation and requirements about this all the time. And I'm like, I always recommend that you do your own discovery for a few minutes. Just make sure you understand what's going on. Yep. So I was like, can you stop and just catch me up on everything? I'm going to do a little bit of discovery. And they're like, yeah, that's fine. So I came in, did some discovery, come to find out that they were actually trying to procure new software. Come to find out that they didn't need to procure new software. They just really needed training on the software that they had. And they already had the best choice. They already had the good stuff. They just didn't know how to use it. And there was like one little custom field that needed to be added. And so instead of continuing down this whole, this was going to be like a 12 to 18 month project. I was like, pull the lever. Why don't we just call the place you've got, get some training, add that field, and like call it good? And they were like, wait, what? We can do that? And I'm like, yeah. And so we literally, we didn't like completely stop the project, but we stopped to a halt. We talked to the existing vendor. They were like, of course, we'd love to do whatever you need to do to, keep using the software. We stopped it. We did it. And we ended up actually saving a very large amount of money by not procuring different software. But I think when you can, and this took a lot of guts, because it wasn't even my project, right? I was in there to take over for this other person where they'd already spent a significant amount of time and resources and energy to have this discussion, to decide that they needed to go down this path. They'd already put in a ton of effort to it. For me to come in and pull that handle and go, we don't need to go down this path. They were like, wait, what? And then let's go in the small room and have the discussion, right? And so I was like, no, but seriously, let's talk about this. And I was really thankful that they were open-minded to the idea of like, yeah, let's stop and do something different. And it ended up being a really big win for the company to do that. So I think, sometimes you just have to have the courage to say, wait a minute, why are we doing this? This is the wrong thing to do.
This is, I've had some similar experiences there where like my salespeople hated it. The fact that I did that, said I just convinced the client they didn't need to buy some other new piece of software from us, that they could actually do everything they wanted to do with what they had in place there. Yeah. And I tried to explain to the salespeople and said, like, no, we would have lost that client long term because you would have, sold them something that they actually didn't need. They would have eventually figured this out. We've actually maintained them as a client, and a couple of years later, they came back and bought when they were ready for it.
Right.
So you got a couple more years of usage that are out of that. But now it made me think of the one very large, a multi-million-dollar project that I was pulled in on, where we went through and we were looking at vendor solutions, and you had one vendor that was saying yes to everything, and it was like half the cost. And so of course they went with that model, and I just kept saying, high risk, it's not proven. They're customizing a bunch of things. We have no data. It's impossible for us to go and test on those scenarios at a much smaller scale. Yes, performance looks good, but it's missing these key features, this complexity, like all this kind of stuff. And so they started going down as they started building this thing out. And of course, we'd spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. But ultimately, with the early test, and because we pushed so hard on milestone-based payments, like we would have gotten stuck and paid a lot more money. I was an outside vendor, so my client would have spent a lot more money. But because we insisted, it's like, okay, you're going to go with the cheaper route that is higher risk. Like, I get it, because it's, it's $1 million versus $2 million for this one piece, and then all the other costs around it. That's just a software cost. But ultimately, they got value out of learning about it. They better understood the other systems and the integrations. So it's not that the hundreds, let's call it like $400,000 to $500,000 spent on all the services and the work that's done, and maybe another couple $100,000 on the software that was ultimately going to be $1 million when it was delivered. They were able to cut the cost. They still went and bought the more expensive solution that still needed more customization. But the majority of the work that we had done with the failure of this piece, they finally listened to it like it's not hitting any of the milestones, flags going up, risks. And I'm just like, look, it's your decision. This is not my recommendation. I would do this. And then finally for them to make the about face on doing that and leverage that. So they were out of pocket. Of course, they were, $1 billion revenue a year company. So they didn't care so much that it cost that much. Still very expensive initiative. Yeah. But, that sometimes, I learned this there as a kid, that there are some people that you can tell them, don't do this because this could happen, or look at what happened to other people. Don't do it. And as a kid, the kids are like, I don't need to go do that. I trust the adult. I trust the advice. And other kids, you could tell them the same thing, and they'll just be like, okay, yeah, I understand. And then they'll go do the thing. And they have to fail, and sometimes repeatedly, to learn the lesson. They can't learn from the mistakes of others.
Yep.
And this is an example of an organization where, no matter of convincing of the risk, they went down the financial path rather than all of the other factors until they then learned the lesson. Sometimes there's like the true cost of things is more, and to not just go with the lowest bid.
Yep.
In every case. But
cheaper is not always better. Expensive is not always better, but cheaper is not always better.
Correct.
Yeah. Yep. So I think really what it comes down to is, back to that whole, what problem are you trying to solve? What's your goal? Where are you trying to get to? Making sure that is very well defined. And that you hold that in front of your team, that you're regularly making sure that you're working towards that goal, and that you're making progress towards that goal, and getting, having those feedback loops in place so that your stakeholders are able to say, wait, I feel like you're veering away from, the endpoint, and your team also has the ability to say, hey, we're veering away from whatever it is we're trying to accomplish.
Have those conversations. Like, here's the KPIs. Here's our objectives. Our KPIs. These are what we're focused on. I like that you have that built into the structure so that anybody can pull the halt, like on the bus, ding, like, hey, this next stop, we have to get off, or somebody can halt the assembly line of that, and let people share their opinions of those risks. It's good also to have discussions around it, like, hey, this could be a risk. Here's what would happen. Here's what we would do if this risk became a reality. Have that level of discussions. I remember having a conversation with a leader that was concerned with the level of detail around the risk planning that I was doing. And I was like, well, but that's what I hope this never happens. But this is part of how we're mitigating this.
Right.
We're making other adjustments to make sure, knowing that this is a potential risk and other things, are there steps we can take just to help redirect so that increase or decrease the chance of that risk happening? I'm going to go do some of that activity,
right,
to help things stay on the right path.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think understanding what your potential risks are is huge. I think making sure that you're, headed down the right path makes a big difference. But I think if you ignore those things, right? If you ignore like where are we headed, or you're also ignoring what are the alternate paths, what are the risks? Because let's be honest, between both of us, how many happy paths do you actually end up going down? Probably not as many as you do risk paths, right?
Not as many as I would like, but
not as many as you would like. Exactly. So it's better to know that risk path, to know that alternate path, so than it is to try to assume that the happy path is always going to work.
We live in the reality as Murphy's Law is thriving in this world. So something bad can happen. It will usually happen. And
if something can break, it will, man.
Plan for it. Yeah. I love that saying. It's like, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. So let's plan around those, do the risk analysis, have your mitigation strategy for those risks. Thinking of other best practices and call to actions to kind of close this out.
Yeah, I think my most important would be, back to the kind of what we've been saying the whole time, which is, what is it that you're delivering? How are you solving the problem? What is the goal you're trying to get to? Making sure that you understand what that is at a high level, and then, being able to maybe, you do a pilot, check it out, like, see, is this something that's, feasibility studies are like this. I feel like it's like, a lost art. We, way back at the beginning when I first did this, like, you would do a whole feasibility study to say, can we actually do the thing we want to do, so that we can hit our goal before we even ever tried to throw, a ton of money and resources at it. So I think, doing things like pilots and feasibility studies is really important to decide, can you even hit the goal that you're trying to hit?
Yeah. I love that outcome-based focus. Like, what are those goals? Does everybody know what the goals are? Do they know what they're doing day to day, how it helps achieve those goals, so that having those KPIs, talking about those. I also like the whole idea of stakeholder storytelling around that. I used to phrase this as, like, do we know what success looks like?
Right.
And so I've had leaders, and I've done it this way sometimes too, where I said, let's talk about this. If this is successful, here's what this looks like, and tell the story around that. Then that allows us to do these things. This is why we're pursuing this path. People respond to that. And there's something that their minds get around if they understand the whole story, and how that then changes the culture, the way that we work, the things, what it's streamlining, all those, because it helps drive that purpose and that focus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important to be open-minded to flexibility. So like you said, there's a time and a place for waterfall methodology when it's needed for the right reasons, but really ultimately, the more iterative, the more agile things can be in terms of identifying when there is a change that needs to be made, and being able to make that change effectively becomes crucial in terms of making sure that you're delivering the thing you're actually supposed to be delivering.
And I just, sorry, I have to go and look this up here if I forget. Oh, that's right. That's who it is. I'm just like, the new theme song for this episode is TLC's Waterfalls.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
No, but just other things too, like call to action here. I like think about this. If you're planning on a project, I mean, think about that. Outcome based, the OKRs, KPIs for that, so that you have the milestones, you know what it looks like at the end. If you're in the middle of a project, I mean, anytime it's like planting a tree, Sharon. I don't know if you've ever heard this. No, but it's like planting a tree that, like, 50 years ago would have been a great time, but like do it now. So go in now with all of your projects and saying, hey, what value are we actually delivering to whom? Who is this? And adjust the project accordingly. If you don't know, if it's not clear, you should be able to answer that.
Yeah, exactly. And always be asking, right? Are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? Are we delivering what we're supposed to be delivering? Is the end goal in mind? And are we on that path? And listen to that feedback. I mean, I think it's as important to provide the feedback as it is to listen to the feedback. I think this is really where a lot of project managers, what not to do. Don't listen to your team. Don't listen to your stakeholders. I think sometimes people say things and you don't hear what they're saying. So I think it's important for everybody to basically keep asking the question, but also listen to the answer and take action on it if necessary.
There's nothing wrong with saying, going and saying, hey, can you rephrase it? Or I'm still trying to understand. Or like, if you want to take it offline out of that meeting and go to your manager and say, it's still, I'm not computing this. It's not coming together. Help me understand this. I'm thinking of it in this way. What do I need to, like, how do I need to adjust my thinking about it so I kind of get it? And that may flag, hey, it's not clear what it is that we're trying to do or what the benefits are of this project. So everyone should have that clarity. And sometimes, people aren't going to ask a question, raise a hand. They don't want to look stupid in that big meeting, but you might want to go around to all the stakeholders, all of the people that are participants in the project, and make sure everybody is clear on that. And that just helps with overall communication when everyone gets it. Yeah. Then you can have, again, I'm going back to my MTV real world. Then you can stop being nice and have real conversations, Sharon.
And had to finish it out with it.
And of course.
I agree.
So here we are at the end of another episode. Thanks everybody for watching this. Of course, we'll be back next Monday, every Monday for the rest of our lives. Not true, Sharon. There's a pause that's coming up. There's plans.
Ooh.
So we'll share that in a couple weeks.
What?
I know. There's stuff happening.
Nice.
But of course, you can still follow us out on the socials. You can find us all over the place. You can go and find all the past episodes out on the Tube of Views. And of course, you can always go and sign up for our newsletter out at projectfailurefiles.com. That's part of what's coming, Sharon. So the change is afoot.
That's okay, because we're practicing what we preach. We're identifying the change. We're dealing with it. We're doing it.
Yeah, we're dealing with it. Yeah, there's stuff. There's change. But thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next Monday with another episode. Sharon, we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye. I guess I can do the outro now. Okay, go. Captain Kirk would not lead us astray, Sharon. No. I want to know. I want his perspective.